play.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear the thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
We just can't figure out why there's two Chris's. Okay? We talked about that last night.
Yes.
We just can't figure it out. There's a Chris, okay? If somebody asked me my kid's child routine, I would say, I don't know, go ask their mom. That's the truth, right? And so it is very surprising to me, and it warms my heart that you're the type of dad who can pack a bag in the morning, and you know just what to put in there, and you know just what to put in there as a backup in case they have an accident, okay? You know what the clothes to put in there, you know what they have for breakfast, you know what they have for a snack, and a dinner, and a nighttime snack. You can tell me the book you read to your daughters, okay? I know you love them, and you're not faking that, are you? It's real, okay? There's a lot of guys who come in here and try to tell me that, and I know they're lying, okay? Because they can't answer those questions that you can answer, okay? But you aren't here today lying about something else. So we need to talk about that, okay? About your daughter.
Did you catch that? And so, hi guys, nice to see you all. We are going to talk about the Sermon on the Porch part 2, actually where he's on the driveway. But what is really interesting in this particular interview that was done on the Wednesday, shortly after the polygraph test, is Agent Coda says there are two Chris's. He says there's something we just can't figure out. Why are there two Chris's? There's the one Chris that's a really good dad and is a great husband, and no one can say anything bad about you. And they say, we've asked people and everyone's got nice things to say about you. And I must say, when I saw this, probably in November, remember, although the interview was done 2 days after the crime, so the crime happened early Monday morning, right? The 13th. Then there was the Tuesday. Then Watts went in to be interrogated that night. Then he was sent home. And then the next day came in, did the polygraph and failed. And then this was the aftermath to the failure. And so at this point, Coda says to him, there's something we're really confused about. Why are there two Chris's? And it's at this point that there's a major breakthrough. It's at this point where Coda confronts him on this in quite a gentle way, saying, well, we can see you're a really nice guy, but there's another Chris as well, that Watts basically feels, wow, I'm going to have to, they onto me, but I'm going to have to give them something, right? And the thing that was so crazy about this was, as I said, I watched this, although it was recorded very early on, within 2 days or so of the crime. And the rest of us only watched this, I think, in November, around about November the 19th or so, when the discovery was released. And as some of you know, I wrote a series of books, and the series was called Two-Face, the Two-Face series, right? Every single book had the word Two-Face in it, right? Two-Face, the man underneath Christopher Watts, Two-Face beneath the oil, and so on. And so I wrote 9 books in that particular series. Or was it more? 9 books in that series, and then another 3 that were the Silver Fox series. And so you must remember, very early on, I had to try and, as an author, I had to try and figure out who is this guy in the most simple terms. And the answer seemed to be a Two-Face, right? Who was he in terms of our very early perception. And so certainly when he was on the porch, he comes across as the nice guy, but he's such a bad liar that you can clearly see that there's another person there. And so that did seem very central to it. So how he addresses this, and you may have caught it at the end there where Coda says, what's going on? We can see this one side to you, but we know there's another side. What is this other side? And then he says, I cheated on her, right? And then that is the beginning of the story of this other face to Chris Watts, this other side to him. This, instead of this, the public face that he put on during the Sermon on the Porch, there's this other face. And we're going to look at how and why we can tell someone is lying. One of the things we saw in the first analysis, and we kind of concentrated on that, was the mismatch between what you're saying, right, and the effect. So if you're saying, you know, it was horrible and I really miss this, but you're saying it with a big smile on your face, that's a problem. And now I've put a poll on YouTube. I hope you guys have voted. If you haven't, please do vote. And the poll is, what have I done with that poll now? I thought I had it up. What is the poll? Can you guys see it there? I think I'm going to have to open another tab. Sorry, I thought I had it ready. If you haven't voted, please do vote. What are the signs of someone lying, but in particular, Chris Watts? What are the obvious signs? I think I'm going to put this on full screen. Okay, and so not that long ago, most of you had voted for C, and I see now D has overtaken C. And so most of you are saying that lots of extraneous information, giving a lot of information that really doesn't mean anything. And then some of you are saying, well, what he doesn't say is the thing that gives Chris Watts away. And we're going to revisit this question. I see it's almost the same amount throughout. A, 20%, B, 22%, C, 28%, D, 29%. What is the answer? What do you guys think is the answer? Melster says his words do not match his physical expressions. We dealt with that in the first analysis. In this analysis, we kind of want to take that one step further. Okay, so Deborah says he was smirking, trying to hide his smile. Pauline says A more than B. And Earth says D. Mike says D. Kimchi says D. Okay, well, we'll have a look at that. Let's go to the second part of the sermon, the part that he gave after the Sermon on the Porch, and see what we can see. It's not that one, it's this one.
The most important thing, like, I'm not sure, I'll just wait for you to ask a question, but like, it's, I want them wherever.
Sorry, that audio is terrible. I'm going to rather play this one.
The most important thing, like, I'm not sure, I'll just wait for you to ask a question, but like, it's, I want them wherever they're at. Like, I have no inclination to where they're at right now. Like, I've exhausted like every friend that I know of, and every friend that I have has called friends that Shanann has that maybe I didn't know about, and it's just like it's vanished. Like, she's not, like, when I got home yesterday, it was like a ghost town. Like, she wasn't here, kids weren't here. I have no idea like where they went, and it's just earth shattering. I don't feel like this is even real right now. It's like a nightmare that I just can't wake up from.
That was actually an incredible series of statements he made there. So colorful, you know, just touching on all sorts of things that is really revealing his thought process. And some people call it an embedded confession. I simply refer to it as colorful language. He can use any words that he wants to, and yet he chooses words like earth shattering. He chooses words like ghost town, and there's a reason for that, right? There's a reason for that, and you may not think so, but he is trying to tell you everything that he can possibly tell you without telling you everything, if I can put it that way. In other words, he knows you want the information. He's desperate to give you as much that as he can, while at the same time not giving away the farm kind of thing, right? So he does want to convey the truth and he doesn't want to tell the truth, but it's kind of selective. And so part of how he tells the truth is by telling the truth in a certain manner of speaking. We spoke about these double meanings last time. I really believe that it did feel to him like a nightmare, right? It's not the same nightmare that Shanann experienced. It's not the same nightmare that the kids experienced. But make no mistake, he was experiencing a nightmare as well. Not one that we particularly care about, but one that he definitely cared about. He was in a nightmare that this can't go on, and he also used those terms. This situation he was in where he was having an affair, where he was spending every night at Kissinger's, couldn't go on, and this was his way of kind of dealing with that nightmare. Make no mistake, he was in a nightmare. So him saying that is true. It's easy to forget that he's dealing with this in a certain way, but the strange thing is he's laughing in the middle of a nightmare, well, because he feels that the nightmare is now over, right? He didn't really realize the real nightmare is about to begin. The other thing that's so curious is how he says none of this feels real.
This isn't even real right now. It's like a nightmare that I just can't wake up from.
None of this feels real. And I think a lot of crimes are committed by perpetrators who have lost touch to some extent with reality. For whatever reason, they're in love, they are so stressed that they can't think straight, they are in a serious situation because of whatever, impending financial disaster, debt, all sorts of things. That can take you away from reality. That can make you lose touch with reality. Let's play the first section one more time, just slowly.
I'll just wait for you to ask a question, but like, I want them wherever they're at. Like, I have no inclination of where they're at.
So someone actually wrote a book with that title, I Have No Inclination. I'm not quite sure why that is so significant for some people. It's using quite fancy language, but beyond that, it's not terribly revealing, because it is Chris Watts trying to sound quite sophisticated, more smarter than what he actually is. I can't imagine him often using a term like that. I can't imagine him saying to Shanann, I have no inclination where the yogurt is in the refrigerator, right? I just don't think that's how he speaks.
Right now, like, I've exhausted like every friend that I know of, and every friend that I have has called friends that Shanann has that maybe I didn't know about, and it's just like.
So the other thing to note is the left hand. There's no ring finger on that hand, and that is why I say the primary audience for this interview is actually Nicole Kessinger. He's so out of it that he doesn't really realize people might notice that he's not wearing his wedding ring. But it's important to him that basically Nicole Kessinger notices this.
It's vanished. Like, she's not, like, when I got home yesterday, it was like a ghost town. Like, she wasn't here. Kids weren't here. I have no idea like where they went. And it doesn't.
So when he says they vanished, he's quite certain about that. He's not saying they're missing, we're not quite sure where they are. You can imagine if Shanann and the kids went to South Carolina when they went originally, he would never have said to anyone they vanished. He would have said, well, they're not here and they are there, but you would never use an absolute term like that someone has vanished. The other thing to think about is, if you think about it from his perspective, that and that's why I say, if Shanann and the kids hadn't gone to South Carolina for as long as they did, I don't know whether Chris Watts would have had that opportunity to think, this is what it's like with them not here at all, right? So let's say they'd gone for a week or 2 weeks. I don't think he would have reached that point where he thought, it's so incredible not having them here, right? And so with this protracted period, 5 weeks that they're not there, when they come back and then she leaves again, he obviously has this almost this wishful thinking, this fantasy. I wish they would just disappear. What I would like in this sort of wishful thinking frame of mind is, for my dream to come true, they need to just to vanish. And so that's literally what he does. He makes this wishful thinking thing happen, except the reality of it is almost too unbearable to contemplate, right? He makes them vanish, right? He wanted them to vanish, and this is exactly how he's made them vanish. And he's now transferring this thought in a way wholesale to the journalists, right?
If just earth shattering, I don't feel like this is even real right now. It's like a nightmare that I just can't wake up from.
And then at the end of that little speech, which he does quite a lot of talking there compared to the Sermon on the Porch, where he gives fairly short answers. I must keep asking him. This is quite a colorful little speech that he gives. It lasts almost half a minute. He ends that off with the clipped response with his mouth. And as we said previously, let's just play it a few more seconds.
Chris, when did you learn that they weren't here? Learn that they got it. Chris, when did you?
Right. So what he's trying to do there is almost close off thoughts that are continuing to sort of pass through his mind by controlling his emotions on his face. It's a way of almost putting up a bit of a wall into his own thought process that's going on behind that.
You learned that they weren't here.
Like I had texted her a few times, called her, I didn't get a response, which that was a little off. And then her friend Nicole showed up about a little afternoon. I could see it on the doorbell camera, and I was like, "Hey, what's going on?" She's like, "I can't get a hold of Shanann." And that's when I was just like, all right, something's not right. If she's not answering the door, and she said the car was here, it's like, I gotta go home. And we got here, got inside, and nobody was here. Nothing.
Yeah, so that to me is a really standout statement, which he also made on the porch, where he said nothing. Nothing was here. I think he first said, and nothing. And then he said, nobody was here, to kind of soften it a little bit. Because in a way, he was referring to them as nothing, right? What I mean by that is, what he's trying to say is, when he came home, there was nothing. And how the reporter may be interpreting that is, when he came home, nothing meant there was no sign of Shanann or the kids. And that's true. There was no sign of them, but that's the terms in which he's thinking of them now. In other words, where's Shanann? Well, there's nothing. There's no sign of them. And he's already thinking about that in an evidentiary way. He's really giving away very much of how he's thinking about this. And if you think that that's kind of overstating it or looking into it too much, I want to play you a short clip from another case that I've been, I guess, thinking about quite a lot lately. and it's where someone is asked, "Did you kill your daughter?" And I want you to take note how the guy who answers the question says nothing. After this ad, okay, let's play it.
Your daughter?
No, never. And, there's nothing.
You see, it's the same sort of idea that where's this person? What happened to this person? And the answer then being there's nothing. It's not really, it seems a bit of a strange way to address the question, to use the word nothing in there. Do you agree?
Are you sick of having issues with your webinars, wasting tons of time on troubleshooting with attendees?
And so I read that Shanann hadn't taken girls to school, which was unusual.
Yeah, because like Bella was going to start kindergarten next Monday.
So why do you think he lies about that? Why must he say, because he sort of says Bella was going to start school, and then he says next Monday. Why does he need to lie about that?
Like Bella was going to start kindergarten next Monday.
Do you notice how he says it and then there's a pause and then he kind of looks up in the air? So yeah, that's true. He's already referring to Bella in the past tense. And there's that certainty as well. Bella's not going to be attending school, right? He knows that there's certainty of that. And I don't know if you guys remember, he was supposed to take the kids to school, take Bella to school that day, the day that they were killed, the day that they were buried. And that was some of the last messages that Shanann sent to Chris Watts was basically, will you pack this for Bella and will you go with me to take her to school? And I think what Shanann was looking for that Sunday was a bit of reinforcement that, if no matter what Chris has done, if he's in on this, taking care of Bella, if he's willing to do it, then there's nothing really to worry about. And so I think that was in a way a test from Shanann. Do you remember she said something about, will you pack her lunch or something? And I don't think he ever did. And will you go with me and her and take her to school? Do you remember that? And I don't think he did prepare anything, in the same way that he never wrote a return letter to Shanann, in the same way that he never read the book, he threw it away. All of that was a sign that he started premeditating this crime, probably, like, I think there was daydreaming premeditation, where he was just, the ideas crossing his mind. And there were also, I think, the attempts on Nico's life with like a chemical formula. But I think the actual planning, I'm going to get rid of this entire family, I think was happening over the weekend, probably Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So the fact that he said that, meanwhile he was already planning something else, it was already well established. I'm just going to look at some of your comments. Thanks for that, Sharon. As far as we know, there seem to have been two incidents where that could have happened. The one was on the Friday when Shanann left for Arizona. She said she felt ill, although he didn't say that he had done anything in that case. But the other one was when, on the day that he arrived in is it South Carolina? I always get confused because even if you arrive there, Myrtle Beach is, anyway. On the day that he arrived, on the day that he saw Shanann, he poisoned her that day, right, with oxy that he got from the basement. So there are at least 2 occasions where that happened.
And they were just getting ready to start back again.
The other thing is the idea of the girls going to school was something that he also dreaded because it was a financial burden for him. They were attending quite a expensive school, and one of the first things he did after that morning, after the murders had been committed, after the disposal, was that he called the school and said, I'm not bringing them. He wanted to prevent any additional financial. So in other words, what it's showing is there were twin issues driving him, two main drivers that were driving him. The one being the affair, and that he wanted to he wanted to perpetuate the affair. He wanted the affair to continue. He wanted to clear the way for the affair. And the other one was finances, where he sort of felt, I need to be able to afford to stay in this affair. I probably am going to need to move into some kind of apartment, but I can't afford it. He could barely afford the meal where him and Nicole Kessinger went to the Lazy Dog. He could barely afford that. A lot of their other credit cards and so on were kind of maxed out. And so he needed to kind of raise money quickly, which he definitely wasn't going to be able to do if Shanann was still around. And there you have him again doing that lip curl thing, where he's just spoken about. He's speaking about Bella and the kids going to school, but he's very aware that that's what he doesn't want them to do. He doesn't want them going back to school. He doesn't want, and if you ask the question, and I know it sounds a little, what's the word? It sounds very heartless to ask a question like this. It sounds very calculating. But if we're trying to figure out the criminal psychology here. So it's not a question we're asking in a flippant way. It's a question we're asking within the gravitas of the criminal psychology. And the question is, why was it necessary in his mind to kill the children when surely he could solve the problems he was having in terms of an affair by killing one person? Why was it necessary to kill the children as well? And as I said, it's within this criminal psychology perspective. And the answer is because of the financial aspect. Do you agree with that? I think it was the financial aspect, and also to some extent the time thing, where if in a scenario where he'd just come through a weekend where he couldn't see Nicole Kessinger at all because he was with his own children, and if he was thinking about that, if he was thinking about do I really want to do this, that weekend I think provided him with his answer. He really wanted to be with Nicole Kessinger on the Sunday. He really wanted to be with her on the Saturday, but he couldn't because he had to look after his children. And so it was a time and money thing that I think prompted him to make that decision. And I think in that respect, there is a heck of a lot of narcissism coming through, where you're saying, well, I mean, his mind and heart are so addled by how much he's addicted to Kessinger. He's really not thinking clearly, or even as a normal person would. His brain isn't really working properly.
Yeah, because like she was here at the front door, and that's when I kind of knew, okay, like if she's not answering anybody else either, this isn't like her. Because I mean, she works that direct sales business, and that's that's what she does. And for her not to respond to any of her people, that, I mean, if she doesn't respond to me, that's fine. I mean, like, she's busy, she's got stuff going on, but not to respond to her people, though, that was not like her.
So there's a longer blink there as well. I'm not sure if it's got too much, it's telling you too much, except that he knows she's not going to be responding. He knows, so those calls that he sent, I think he said he called her 3 times, he texted her, I think 3 times. He knows she's not going to respond. Those are staged. And one does wonder if it had gone on for another day or 2 or 3, how would the staging continue? Would he have tried to stage something on her phone? Because she was on Facebook constantly. So could he not have posted something through her account? And bear in mind, in the Morphew case, you had something that was similar to that, where apparently Suzanne Morphew made like a dozen friend requests when it's not clear whether she was actually alive then or not. I think there was some on the Friday night, and then I think also some on the Saturday. But there was definitely there appears to be some sort of weird social media staging going on in the Suzanne Morphew case. In the Patrick Frazee case, you had staged texts long after she died, basically saying, "I'm not coming into work." And one wonders whether Watts was, if he had the opportunity, would he have tried to do something like that? And the fact that he already staged calls and texts on the morning suggests that he may have continued to try to do that. Maria says he definitely planned it.
Chris, you've got a beautiful family, you know, and it looks like you all love each other very much. What went through your mind the minute kind of you're like, something's wrong?
Like I was trying to get home as fast as I can. I was blowing through stoplights. I was blowing through everything, just trying to get home as fast as I can, because none of this made sense.
Is that true? And the other thing there is, that's another moment where he actually kind of laughs out loud. He's sort of chuckling, but there's a bit of a verbalized chuckle as well, right? He's got him like an open-mouthed smile. And is that true? Is it true that he tried to get home as quickly as possible? Because I don't know if you remember what in the body cam that showed Nicole Atkinson, and also the text that they were sending. They wanted to go into the house before he got there because he was taking so long. And she sort of felt, wow, it's already been whatever it was, an hour. Why are you still not here? The other thing is, he's saying, making it sound like he drove really fast and drove straight there. And it turns out he didn't drive straight there. He came via Black Mesa Road, which I've actually driven that route myself. It's not the shortest route. It's taking you kind of a very indirect way around, a roundabout way back into the neighborhood. And I was there, as it turns out, on a Tuesday when they were collecting the garbage. And he went there on the Monday midday and disposed of something in a what do you call those containers? A dumpster. Apparently, the GPS data showed his vehicle pausing there for a short time, and so that's not true either. He didn't come back as soon as possible. The other thing that I think really stands out here is when he's asked, what is going through your mind? It's a really great question to ask a suspect, because literally what it does is it has them self-reference their own thoughts. Now, they might not tell you what they were really thinking, but they are being reminded of what they're really thinking. And what happens when he does that is he gulps, what was going through your mind? I can tell you what was going through his mind. Oh shit. In other words, basically, I've just committed this crime, and like I barely even gotten back to work, and the police are at my house. He must have is I'm pretty sure that his heart was exploding in his chest, and I think you can kind of see that when he arrives at the house, and he sort of runs up to the officer and then almost just bypasses him and goes into the garage. He can barely speak. He's so nervous, right? He's just done something unspeakable, and they've caught him almost immediately. And it is a shocking, terrifying nightmare that he's created for himself, and now he's got to deal with. So I want you to take note. I'll put it on full screen. I want you to take note when he's asked what is going through your mind. Watch how he gulps at that moment. And then shortly after that, he talks about how his heart is beating, and I'm sure it was.
That was not like her.
Chris, you've got a beautiful family, you know, and it looks like you all love each other very much. What went through your mind the minute kind of you're like something?
There's the gulp.
Like I was trying to get home as fast as I can. I was blowing through stoplights. I was blowing through everything, just trying to get home as fast as I can, because none of this made sense. Like, if she wasn't here, like, where did she go? Like, once I got here, it was like, all right, who can I call? Who do I know that she could be with right now? If she went to a friend's house, where could she be staying? And we went through everybody. I mean, just.
So I don't know if you remember, he wasn't really calling anyone. He could. Thanks a lot, Sharon. Thank you. Thanks. He wasn't really calling anyone, and in fact, everyone else seemed to be offering ideas, Nicole Atkinson and the officer, about should we contact the bank? Have you contacted the bank? Have you called these hospitals? He wasn't really. He was almost like, okay, what questions have you got? I'll try and answer them. It wasn't really. He didn't really come there with any kind of game plan or game face. He thought this was going to be a lot easier. He thought this was going to be a lot simpler. And I don't know whether the whole Thrive thing, I don't know whether the, making, the whole thing with Thrive gave him the impression that it's so easy to tell someone something and people are going to accept it. I'm going to say something that some people are going to not like and resent is, in multi-level marketing, there are a lot of aphorisms, there are a lot of sort of empty statements where you say things and it's almost like magical thinking. You say something and the people on the other side, because they're all part of the same kind of scheme, just repeat the same thing. But you can say almost anything and the people on the other side kind of repeat it and lap it all up. And I don't know whether he assumed that this was going to be the same thing, that if he says something, just on the basis of him saying it, that's going to be enough, right? That's true. He did give Nicole such a bad look when he got home, because she would come up with certain ideas and she'd say things to the officer and I think to the detective. And Chris Watts was like, you're ruining everything, right? Escape says, I recognize that in people. Okay, so let's play a little bit more.
Everything in my contact list and her friend's contact list, and nothing has come up. Everybody has said like they haven't heard from her either. I'm just hoping right now that she's somewhere safe, and maybe she's there. But right now it's just like, if she's vanished, like, I want her back so bad. I want those kids back so bad.
With a big smile. So there again, he uses the word vanished, which is a strangely absolute word to be using. Vanished is definitely the wrong word, but he knows that they have vanished, because if you look for them, you're not going to find them. So that is him giving away guilty knowledge, isn't it? Now, I just want to come back to the poll. The poll is, let's have a look. Wow, it's quite incredible how even it is. It's actually incredibly even. There's almost 300 votes, and it's literally 26, 26, 26, 22. So in his sermon on the driveway, besides his dodgy body language, and we haven't really spoken about that, he's not actually folding his arms. Let me quickly talk about that. He's not on the driveway with his arms folded like that. This is arms folded, right? He's on the driveway as he was on the porch in a kind of a hugging posture. He's hugging himself. He kind of seems to be. Can you see this hand? He kind of seems to be self-soothing. He kind of seems to be trying to comfort himself on camera. Because he's being exposed, right? He's not just simply blocking out the people in front of him, as most of us would stand like that. He's standing in like almost a childlike pose, where he's this kind of big, strong man, and he's kind of holding it, trying to like hold himself together, like literally hold himself together. And he is kind of, in a sense, in the same way that his story's falling apart on live TV, he's trying not to fall apart, right? So anyway, let's just go back to the poll. The poll is, in his sermon on the driveway, besides dodgy body language, what gives Chris Watts away? 25%, a quarter of you say lots of extraneous information. 22%, the least of you say what he doesn't say. C say A and B, but A more than B. And D, A and B, but B more than A. It's a really close poll, this one. It was actually, one of those was quite far ahead, and I was getting quite concerned, and now it's very even. Right now, as I'm looking at it, there's 26%. So that definitely is quite interesting. I think to help you guys with the poll, and I think those of you vote later on in this will get the answer right. I'm going to play you a little bit more from this video of the interrogation. We almost halfway through the sermon, but we're going to go through just a little bit from the interrogation where more information is revealed. Let's just go to that.
Keep going.
That 5 weeks I was alone, I was with her most of the time.
Okay. You're doing a good job. This is the Chris that I knew would come out today. This is the Chris who tells the truth, because you're a truth teller.
So that's a little bit of mind fuckery from the agent. He's not a truth teller. He's just failed a lie detector test, but Coda's trying to kind of get on his good side. So he's saying, this is the Chris that we know is there, and you're doing the right thing. He's not doing the right thing for himself. He's doing the right thing for the agents. So there's definitely a lot of mind fuckery going on. And credit to the agents for kind of buttering him up. Instead of antagonizing him, accusing him, Tammy Lee kind of came at him quite hard. We know that you're lying. Now you've got to tell us the truth. And then Coda was almost like it was a good cop, bad cop. Coda came in and said, we know you're a really nice guy, but there's another side to you. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And then he does. He's asked nicely, kind of to incriminate himself, and he's told, this is for your own good. You shouldn't keep this inside. And incredibly, he responds to that. He responds to not being attacked and confronted in a nasty way, but being complimented. He responds to being told he's a nice guy. And then he obliges. He's a nice, and he was his own worst enemy here because he was too nice in the situation.
So I fell out of love because I fell in love with her.
Absolutely.
Okay. I mean, that's God's honest truth.
Okay. lose her.
So I don't want to get her involved in this. I don't want to ruin her life. Like if something like this, I don't want her involved in this.
Okay. So can we talk about that a little bit?
Yes.
I knew that you would say you didn't want to get her involved.
But because
you'd like to take her.
She's a wonderful person. Like, I mean, she knew I was married, yes. And I told her we were going through issues, yes.
Yes.
And I told her that, we were going to get, at the end, like, you're going to get separated. Like, once I figured out what that was, I didn't know what that was going to be.
I know.
I had no idea. I like, I saw her, took my breath away, and I'd never thought in a million years that could happen.
I know.
I know you think I'm a figure, but it was, I never felt that way about anybody in my lifetime.
Mm-hmm. Chris, that's not your fault.
No, I'm
So there's some more patronizing. Chris, it's not your fault. Not your fault that you had an affair. Obviously, in this situation, it's very much his fault, especially since Shanann was pregnant. But if you think about yesterday, for those who were here, we dealt with Rex Human, and we're talking about the scale of smallness and insufficiency, to some extent just psychologically, but also in terms of place. The scale of Rex Human's house compared to the scale of the Empire State Building, which is literally diagonally across the road from his office, right? When you realize that actual scale, it's one of the tallest buildings in the world. What we're talking about here is the scale of a love affair. What did this love affair do to Chris Watts? And how often have you said words similar to what he's used here, where he said, never in a million years did I think someone like her exists. And he also said something like, I never thought I would meet someone like her in my lifetime. He's basically saying, in my entire life, I've never actually met someone like this, right? And so that is to some extent, the answer. Not a satisfying answer, not a rational answer, not a moral answer, not the right answer, but the criminal psychology that was going on. He was so in love with this person to the extent that he'd not felt anything close to these feelings for anyone ever before, that he was willing to do completely crazy things. And kind of, to put it mildly, come out of his comfort zone. He didn't just do it like that. He thought about it for a long time. He fantasized about it for a long time. He wished for this outcome for a long time. I think the ideal situation for him was if the baby could just be undone, right? If the baby could be undone, then Shanann would have probably accepted a divorce. And I think he tried that in the beginning. If he could just find some way for the baby to no longer be part of the picture, then that was one solution. But now the baby was part of the picture. And if the baby with Shanann, if he couldn't get rid of the baby, he had to get rid of Shanann to get rid of the baby, and then it became this annihilation, right? But what I'm trying to say is, can you appreciate, and this is not to say to sympathize with him, and it's not to say to understand him, it's to say to figure out the criminal psychology. It's coming from the scale of someone who is incredibly in love with somebody else. Not necessarily in a good way, maybe in an obsessed way, maybe in a very desperate kind of love affair, right? And most important is it kind of in a dream world. It's not the kind of relationship that even Nicole thought. She didn't necessarily think it's going to lead to marriage. She even said at one point, he seems too good to be true. And so he was pretending to be a certain kind of guy with her. But the point is, for the first time in his life, he'd met someone that was really lighting his fire. I think the sexual part was a huge part of it, but I think there's another part of him that was that it really come alive. He knew how to keep Shanann happy, just do whatever she says. Here was someone who listened to him when he said something. Here was someone who had a very interesting life that he was legitimately interested in. He was interested in what she thought about whatever. She was interested in cars, I think. They went to look to a car museum. They went to watch the, can't remember, they went to that one speedway, right? They ate at restaurants. They were both interested in healthy food and eating and exercise. He'd started jogging, I think like 5 miles a day. If Shanann had been able to participate in that side of his life, jogging, exercising, eating the same thing that he was, just that on its own, eating the same thing he was eating, because in a way he was already on a separate diet to what she was on, then who knows, the outcome could have been different. But once he lost a certain amount of weight, he came onto Kessinger's radar. And that's another part that I think is easy to miss. These are two youngish 30-somethings. And Kessinger's status in terms of her life hadn't been determined. She had a friend who was about to get married, and she was starting to worry and wonder about her future in terms of, who am I going to be with? Am I going to ever have children or whatever? And this guy comes along and he sticks out compared to all of his colleagues. All of these guys who come into the office, this guy's quite neat, quite presentable, quite soft-spoken, quite seemingly good-natured. Basically, someone who seems like a really nice guy. And she needed that. She'd been in a relationship where the previous guy was, I think, not very kind to, not very nice to. And then Chris Watts is there, and he's a very sweet-natured guy, apparently. And unfortunately, because their relationship is so fast and furious, it brings out his dark side. He's keeping a secret, and he realizes the only way to keep this relationship going is to continue with the secret. The other thing is, I believe that she said to him, I want to be number one. I've been number two in my life so often. I want to be number one. And he realized the only way to make her number one was, well, fill in the blank.
No, I'm just,
Well, can we do this? I know you want to take care of her it's because you're the type of guy who takes care of women. It is. You took care of your wife, you took care of your daughters, you were very good at taking care, and you want to take care of her. So can we make a deal? I don't think this girl did anything to hurt anybody, but I can't walk out of here wondering. So can we leave her out of it?
Okay.
Get back to your wife and your daughters.
okay.
Where are they?
That I do not know. That was what I was holding back. Like, I didn't know, like, what I did. I know.
Chris, in the interview today, you weren't asked about infidelity. You were asked about.
I was holding back from last night.
That's
When
not
you
why
talk-
you feel today.
That's not how that works. You would have reactions to every single question, not just the ones that we talked about being important.
Okay, so I'm not going to play too much more than that, but what is the elephant on the driveway when this reporter is asking the question? What is the elephant that is standing on the porch making a kind of creak, almost like a ship that is now getting top heavy? What is the elephant that should be in that picture but is not? So let's go back to the poll, and the poll, let's see. Wow, I don't know when last there was such a neck and neck poll. In his sermon on the driveway, besides his dodgy body language, what gives Chris Watts away? 25% say lots of extraneous information. That's true. He does give away extraneous information. I'm not sure if I would say it's a lot. He's kind of telling a story that is somewhat true. 23% say B, what he doesn't say. C say A and B, but A more than B. And D, 25% say A and B, but B more than A. there's only one right answer here. I mean, there's some answers that are partially right, but there's only full marks for one answer. It's pretty incredible. I think it's quite a good poll because it is making you guys think. Let's have a look at what some of you have said. Stephanie says, I said D. Maria says, what's B? B is what he doesn't say. So far, the least of you have voted for that one, what he doesn't say. So, allegedly innocent said, I said A. Beck said, I said C. Earth said, I said D. It seems the most accurate. Yeah, B is omitting information. B is omitting information. Okay. Okay, so think about that as we go through the rest of this sermon. Okay, you ready?
You know, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the hard part. Your first thought is, where are they? I want them back. Your second thought is, you know, your friends were telling us, and we kind of heard from you a little phone. You're also, your second thought is that you're afraid people think you may have done something.
Yeah, I mean, not everybody's gonna have their own opinion on anything like this. I just want people to know that I want my family back. Like, I want them safe, and I want them here. Like, this house is not the same. I mean, last night was traumatic. Last night was, I can't really stay in this house again, like, with nobody here. And
so, in a way, he's revealing some of his cards. It's Tuesday, and he's saying, I can't really stay here anymore. Well, you know, I think Nicole Kissinger even said something like, you need to be there when they get back. And she even suggested maybe you should park your truck somewhere else, because if the last thing you did was have an argument, then she might want to be there when you're not there, right? So she was really kind of overthinking it in a way, but in a way that did make some kind of sense. But if you think about it from his perspective, he doesn't want to live in that house. In fact, he didn't even live in that house for the 6 weeks previously, because he was living with Kissinger. He would come home from work, the GPS on his work truck would show him going home, and then he would immediately go to Kissinger's home and spend the night, then spend time with her, and probably used probably used a Lexus to go from his home to Kissinger's home and then back, and then drive back to work, right? And so the thing is, he doesn't want to be in his home anymore. He wants to be in her home. And if not in his home or her home, well, then in some apartment close to home, but he doesn't really want to be in his home anymore. Being with her has made so much emotional sense for him that he's even lost any connection to his own house and home. He wants to sell it. He wants to get rid of it. He wants to start the next phase of his life as soon as he possibly can. He can't wait. And him saying that he doesn't want to sleep in that house probably was hard for him, sleeping in the house on Saturday and Sunday and Monday and yeah, not Tuesday, but and Monday. It was probably tough for him sleeping there when he sort of thought, I'm back in Colorado. Remember, he'd been away for a week. I'm back in Colorado. She's just around the corner, but I can't see them because first, the kids are here and there's a party on that day. And then second, because people are watching me now. People are paying attention to where I am. So now I can't just go there. And so the thing, although in theory is cleared the way to see Kissinger, actually, no, he's never going to see her again.
last night, I wanted that knock on the door. I wanted to see this kid just run in, just barrel rush me and just give me a hug and knock me on the ground. But that didn't happen.
Where are you gonna stay with tonight?
So that was a repeat of what he'd said earlier, and I wonder whether, I mean, do you think he really means that he wants his kids to knock him over? Or does he want Kissinger to knock him over? Does he want Kissinger to barrel rush him? Does she want Kissinger to sort of run up to him and jump kind of onto him almost like a chimpanzee, and that kind of thing, that as couples sometimes do?
Probably my friends Nick and Amanda. Unless something develops in the next hours or so, like I'm hoping that somebody sees something or somebody knows something and comes forward.
What's the hardest part of all of this?
So it is interesting how frequently he does that. It's definitely a Chris Watts thing. Constantly trying to put a lid on what he's thinking, what he's feeling. And the thing is, he is feeling a lot. He is trying to hold back that whole thing. As I said before, what is the elephant kind of in the room? I know they're not in a room, but what is the elephant in the room regarding this whole thing?
Not knowing, like if they're safe or if they're in trouble. Like there's just that variable. Like I'm not sure. I can't do anything right now from where I'm at. Like I'm not sure if they're safe somewhere, just huddled up somewhere, or if they're in trouble. And knowing that if they could be in trouble, it just it's earth-shattering right now, and it doesn't.
So there's a second reference to earth-shattering. He's got, for some other reason, he's got this thought, this idea, this impression of earth-shattering in his mind, and it's a clue. It turned out to be quite a good clue. He himself shattered the earth when he dug Shanann's grave. The other thing that he said, just see if I can bring the thread of that thought back. Let's just go back slightly.
It's earth-shattering right now, and it doesn't feel like it's real.
The weird part of all of this, it sounds like everything
In trouble, or if they're in trouble, and I'm not sure. I can't do anything right now from where I'm at. Like I'm not sure if they're safe somewhere, just huddled up somewhere.
So that's the other word that kind of sticks out, huddled up. What do you think about when you think of huddled up? What comes to mind? Again, you're paying attention to colorful words, colorful expressions, unusual words. So look at the meaning of huddle. Shall I put it up like that? It means crowd together, nestle closely. Another word for that is a pile, right? And those are probably the best references, right? Nestle closely, crowd together, a pile. Are there any more? A cluster, a bunch. See if there's some more. Squeeze, cram, jam, pack, press. Right? A small group, a knot, a bunch. Right? So when you look at the meaning of the word that is just used, huddle, he actually said huddled up, right? I don't know if that's going to come up. So he says huddled, that basically means a clump, a cluster, to curl up, to, yeah, it's kind of very similar to that previous meaning. To gather closely together, people huddled up close together. And that is, remember I said earlier, he wants to tell you the truth. He's trying to tell you as much as he can without telling you anything incriminating. What do you think he's getting at here? Lawn Chair Detective, good to have you here. You always bring a smile to my face. there you have it. That is how he had them in the truck. In the truck, Shanann was on the floor, as we understand it, and according to what I think he said, that she was wrapped in a sheet. She was on the floor in front of the rear seat, and the kids were on that rear seat, and effectively they were all there together. The three of them were sort of there together, right? Can you see how that does make sense? That idea of being huddled up, and the other thing that occurs to me when you say huddle or huddled up, is it seems to imply to me a blanket. I don't know how you can. I suppose you can huddle together without one, right? You can have a sports team who huddle together during halftime or during plays. You can have a thing like that. You can have climbers on a mountain that sort of huddle together. But if you think about it in a domestic situation, in a house situation, in a situation with the children, you tend to think of children huddling, where there's, I guess, cuddling involved, there's blankets involved, it's something that is often involving blankets and things like that, right? You see where I'm going with this? I'm not really thinking of it in that sense. The neutral version of huddle is just to be a group of people sitting together, lying together, something like that. So if you think about the fact that they were the children and Shanann, they were all kind of huddled within blankets. That's how I imagine it when they went to the well side. Because I don't know if you remember, Watts eventually admitted that the blankies, he disposed of the blankies, the kids' blankies, right? As far as I know, that is one of the things he threw away at Black Mesa. So you can imagine that the kids, they got up fairly early that morning. You can imagine that they would have been huddled up in their blankies, and Shanann is actually effectively bundled up in a bed sheet, and it kind of just seems probably to them like the three of them are huddling together, right? Bryn says, I'm huddled up with my cat under an electric blanket. That tends to be how you refer to the word huddle. Just that the common colloquial use of the word huddle tends to involve you and a blanket, or you and someone else in a blanket, doesn't it? JC says common football term too. Yeah, it is. It is that as well. I'm not really thinking about football here. I'm thinking he's thinking about blankets and the conventional term, which is a pile of people, right? A pile of people. A huddle, if you huddle, just the word on its own, not huddle up, just huddle on its own, is like a pile of people. And that is exactly what they were in the vehicle, right? I'm surprised you guys there's not too much consensus on this. To me, it's quite clear. But I guess we all interpret things differently. So let's listen to him say that again.
Like there's just that variable, like I'm not sure, I mean, I can't do anything right now from where I'm at. Like I'm not sure if they're safe somewhere, just huddled up somewhere, or if they're in trouble. And
so he's saying huddled up somewhere. Now, something that I've kind of noticed 5 or 6 times already, is every time he mentions them being somewhere, he looks kind of to his left. He looks sort of that way, right? And if you think about where Frederick is and you think about where the well side is, I don't know whether he's looking in that direction. He's looking, I'm just trying to think when I was there. It's almost behind him, but it's kind of in that direction that you would go to the well side. You can't see it from where he's standing because it's kind of in the opposite direction, I think. But there's no doubt in my mind that when he's saying this, he's thinking about the well side, right? Every time he says when they're somewhere and he kind of looks to the left, he's saying they are somewhere. They could be somewhere. He's thinking about where they are, right? And so also when he says huddled up, I think it's a reference to how they were on the way to the well site. And who knows, that might be triggering him in a little way. The way that he disposed of Shanann is she was bundled into a sheet and buried. That she was in a sense buried in a huddled up, she was buried in a kind of fetal position. And I wouldn't be surprised if she was transported in that way as well, in a kind of bundled up, position in the vehicle.
Knowing that if they could be in trouble, it just it's earth-shattering right now, and it doesn't feel like it's real.
When he says that, you can see he's got a smile on the tip of his tongue. He's talking about very directly where they could be and what situation they could be in, and there's a smile on the tip of his tongue. And that's where there's this big mismatch to how he appears and how he should appear, isn't there? Let's listen again.
Could be in trouble. It just.
You see, he says it could be in trouble, and then he actually smiles. He kind of gives a little bit of a puff of humor there. They could be in trouble. And yeah, it is the understatement of the year. I shouldn't be laughing. It's terrible. It's what he's doing there is he knows exactly what situation they are in. And it's like the understatement of the year. And he knows it. And he is finding it amusing. He's finding it, and I mean, it is in a sick way, amusing to him, right? Let's play that again.
And knowing that if they could be in trouble, it just.
You see, just that moment there, he knows that they're in trouble, and that's how it kind of leaks through. Look at some of your comments. Yeah. Now, you know what the difference is? We can look at this and have a kind of an intellectual grasp on what he's talking about. We have a basic idea. We've seen the well site, so we've got an idea where it is and what it looks like. And some people have seen the autopsy photos, and I think everyone who has seen those autopsy photos has been scarred for life, and that's not an understatement. Detective Bormhover, as far as I know, has quit. He's no longer a detective. That's how, to what extent this case has affected him. We're going to talk a little bit later about what DA Rourke said about it. He also saw those photos, and he actually said that he didn't want to look at the photos because he knows what effect they can have on him. And I know what he's talking about because I've seen autopsy photos, and I remember all of them. When I was in Texas, I saw autopsy photos of Mo Wilson, and they burned into my mind. And so you don't want to willy-nilly look at autopsy photos. Anyway. And so we can, without knowing about that in a very graphic way, the thing is, the person who knows the most graphically what he's talking about here is this guy, right? He knows just how much he's destroyed these lives, and he speaks about it with such levity and such amusement. That is what is so dark and disturbing about this person and this case.
It's earth-shattering right now, and it doesn't feel like it's real.
The weird part of all this, it sounds like everything's kind of locked up. There's no sign.
Do you hump the ball? You know what I'm talking about. That awful sort of embarrassing move where your hips.
Signs of them leaving the house.
Sorry about that.
No, like we have camera there, neighbor has a camera. I mean, everything's checked out.
You have a camera in
The doorbell. Everything's checked out.
You have a camera in
The doorbell. Everything's checked out.
You have a camera in
The doorbell. Only right there. The neighbor has.
So don't you agree that that's almost the most scaly and slimy that he's appeared in the total 14-15 minutes? It's almost like the most flagrant lie that he tells in terms of, he doesn't try and charm his way through it. He basically just tells an outright lie, right? What is he lying about? He's saying, well, the cameras have checked out. Guess what? They didn't check out. And maybe he didn't know it at the time. I think he must have known. If you look carefully, you're going to see something, right? The other thing that's really interesting is, and it probably would have come out at trial, is if you see Shanann approaching that Ring doorbell camera, approaching that doorbell camera, then surely there was camera footage of what was going on in the driveway that evening, unless he deleted it. And then the question is, would there be signs of deleting? Would there be signs that that footage was deleted? It had to have been deleted. So although you could control, in theory, the Vivint security footage from later that morning, I don't know. Another way of controlling it is you simply turn the router off, and then, which is, I think, something he did, then it's not going to record anything. So, but let's just watch this part again. It's a big lie, and look how bad he is at telling this big lie. Look at his facial expressions. Look at the twists and contortions in his face when he does this.
Feel like it's real.
The weird part of all this, it sounds like everything's kind of locked up. There's no signs of them leaving the house.
No, like we have camera there, neighbor has a camera. Everything's checked out.
You have a camera in
The doorbell. Only right there. The neighbor has one over there.
So what do we see here is we see that long, lazy blink again. We're sort of shutting out the thoughts of those that are looking at him. Let's watch that again.
No, like we have camera there, neighbor has a camera. Everything was checked out.
And that's kind of where you, I don't know, I kind of get a sense where, in a way, Chris Watts can seem sweet and nice when you just look at his face. But here you kind of get a sense of the silver fox, this other figure that is very calculating and heartless and nasty, to put it mildly. Look at how the moment after he says it all checked out and he has the long blink, the smile comes back. He knows that it's not checking out. Again, he thinks just by telling a lie, he's going to get himself off the hook. Watch the way that there's a long blink and then the smile afterwards.
It's earth-shattering right now, and it doesn't feel like it's real.
The weird part of all this, it sounds like everything's kind of locked up. There's no signs of them leaving the house.
No, like we have camera there, neighbor has a camera. Everything's checked out.
Do you catch that? Did you guys catch that moment? It's just after he closes his eyes and blocked that thought out. When he opens his eyes, it's almost like he's didn't quite successfully block it out. Is amused by what he's doing. He's amused by his duping, by his the fact that he knows more than what the people asking him know.
Their neighbor has a camera. Everything was
So that moment there.
his camera. Everything was. Everything's checked out. Everything's checked out. Everything was. Everything. Their neighbor has a camera. Everything was. Their neighbor has a camera. Everything was. Everything.
Yeah, it's like a micro expression. You've really got to catch it. You can see the levity, the amusement that is hiding behind that comment.
Checked out.
Do you have a camera in there?
The doorbell. Only right there. The neighbor has one over there.
Were all the doors around the house locked?
Front door was locked. The garage door was unlocked, but that's normal for, like, when she comes in the house, she leaves it unlocked just so she can come in and out just in case, to get in the garage door, but the back sliding door was locked as well.
So there's definitely something interesting there. Did you guys know that while Shanann was in, do you remember this? While Shanann was away, she kind of kicked his ass quite a few times, telling him to fix that damn garage sensor. Do you remember that? And she wanted him to call Vivint. She was getting really angry with him. And ultimately, did he fix it? So if you think about how he ultimately committed the crime, it was using the garage door. So it's not clear exactly, again, what Vivint registered that night, but we do know that that sensor was not working very well. And that sensor not working very well would definitely work for someone who is premeditating a crime, because if there's anything that's going to give away your movements, what door, when, and so on, it would be that sensor working and giving away all that information. So here he's saying on camera that sensor didn't work. Well, guess which door was used in the commission of the crime. I would like to know whether he did ultimately fix it, and also whether he ultimately unfixed it later on. As I say, another way of dealing with these security things is if you just turn the Wi-Fi off, they don't really register anything anymore, as far as I know.
So how would she have left the house if she did leave the house? Or anybody?
I don't want to put anything out there. Like,
So that's the second time he said that. I don't want to put anything out there. I remarked on how important that was in a previous video, because that's exactly what he's done with his family. He's put them out there, right? And he does want to put something out there in the sense of he wants to say, I think someone has her. I didn't commit this crime. Somebody else did. And that is actually true. He didn't commit this crime. The other Chris Watts did. What's also interesting to look at is just him standing over there. Again, look how he's not folding his arms like that. He's kind of cuddling himself, holding himself together, soothing himself. It's quite an unusual posture, which you don't often see with men.
suspecting like it's something like somebody pulled in the back, and because we have a driveway back there from the new townhomes, but
He's kind of, can you see he's kind of holding himself together?
it's so hard to tell. Like, there's no cameras in the backyard or anything like that.
So I want to start addressing the poll in a little bit of a more direct way. So some of the questions, or one of the issues is lots of extraneous information, and that is up to 26%. At the moment, it's almost the leading answer, 26%, lots of extraneous information. I feel a little bit differently. He's actually giving you quite a lot of relevant information. He's telling you about right now about the cameras. That is relevant. He's telling you about a garage sensor that didn't work. That's true. He was talking about previously the dogs trying to find sense. That's also true. He was talking about Shanann not getting back to him and the friend that was there. That's also true. It's also part of the fabric. Now, there's going to come a point, I'm not sure if it's right here. I think it's quite near to this moment where someone asks him about his shirt. And he says he really likes the shirt a lot. That's extraneous information. That's not really relevant to any of this. But a lot of the other stuff that he's spoken about actually is relevant. He's asked about cameras. He's asked about what's the last thing, when last did you see her? How did you know something was wrong? And he answered all those questions. So there isn't really that much extraneous information going on if you think about it. Another way of thinking about that is to say, what should he really be talking about here? And by that, I don't mean I committed this murder, right? Let's not be silly about it. But there is something that he really should be communicating, really two things, two central things, two elephants that he's not communicating. And I don't think you can say that this is extraneous information. I'll give an example of extraneous information. It's when he talks about his shirt. Let's see if it's the next question.
So it's really hard to even suspect anything right now as far as how she could have left, or if someone came picked her up, or if someone took her.
Meanwhile, today's reality, you've got cops there, cops here, cops in your house, K9 units.
I've never seen something like this in my lifetime unless it was on TV or a movie. And
so that's also something that is he says to Coda, and it gives you a authentic idea of really what he's going through. Is in the same way that he said, I've never experienced this in my lifetime in terms of his relationship with Kissinger. I've never experienced someone like this in my lifetime. It's true. And by the same token, he's never experienced something like this, police going through his house, in his lifetime either, as far as we know, but I tend to believe him. And so that is also, it's a big deal what he's going through.
This doesn't seem real at all. It just seems like I'm living in a nightmare and I can't get out of it.
He's said that before as well. He's repeated this thing of, it doesn't seem real. I'm in a nightmare. And he says, I want to wake up from it. He's trying to escape his reality. And I mean, he's saying none of this feels real. That is what it feels like when you kind of living in a daydream, when you haven't been in the real world for a long time. When you haven't been in the real world for a long time, when you come back to reality, reality doesn't seem real. Haven't you ever come out of I think this is such a funny point. Haven't you ever come out of a movie and when you step out into the world, the world itself doesn't feel real? I remember as a kid coming out of a James Bond movie, coming out of Star Wars, coming out of especially Rocky, and it suddenly doesn't, your own life doesn't feel like real life because you've been so caught up in this story, right? And that's exactly where he is. It's like, I just want to go back to Nicole. I don't really know what's going on here. That's how caught up he is. But whose fault is it? Whose fault is it that he's gotten to that point? And some of the reason why he's lost so much touch with reality is not getting enough sleep for a protracted period of time, where at night he is texting her. When he's supposed to be resting, he's texting her. When he's supposed to be living one particular side of his life. He's living two lives, and it's exhausting, right? And it's no wonder that he's saying what he's saying. He's not sure what's real, doesn't feel real, and he wishes it would stop. He was about to go into a much worse nightmare when he would go into that cubicle, where his brain was literally going to be melted down, and from then on, his life totally lost. He didn't know it, but right now it already lost his life. It's just a matter of time for it to become kind of official.
I just want them home so bad.
Come.
Did you see your kids and your wife whenever, or you had the kids? I forgot.
Yeah, I had the kids over the weekend.
Did you see your wife when she got
Come.
home?
She got home really late, about 2 a.m. from the airport when she got back from Arizona.
So can you see that's a little bit of an edit from what he said earlier. Earlier he said she got home at 1:48. Literally a couple of minutes earlier he said 1:48, and I said that is very dumb of him to be. He's right, and it's true, but that is the opposite of giving out extraneous information. Now he's kind of amended that to give a more of a ballpark thing, because why do you know the time so exactly? This is a bit of a better answer to that. Okay, let's listen to the rest.
Did you wake up and say,
No, I saw her when she got in, but it was really quick, just because it was 2 a.m. in the morning. But I saw the kids in the monitor before I left, and
so I think all of that is valid and worth noting. Is he is paying attention to monitors, and what does he do for a living? He's a oil worker, right? And his job is to look at dials and gauges and instruments in terms of the health and efficiency of the whole oil infrastructure, right? I mean, his everyday job is to look at what is going on these instruments, and you really get the idea that he's the kind of guy who does that a lot with the security aspect of his home and phone, and also does that with regard to when he talks about monitors, that's the same word you probably use for certain instruments at an oil site. What do the monitors say, right? And I don't know if you guys remember the premise that he gave to going to Survey 319 in the first place was to say something about the monitor. I'm not sure if that's the word he used, but the meter there, whatever it was showing a leak. So can you see how he is very much a kind of guy who would be aware of things like numbers and times and all that kind of thing. And I've got no doubt that he was waiting for Shanann he was waiting for the alert from Vivian to say she's arriving, right? And was also very aware that he could be caught out by the way his movements might be monitored. So in that sense, he was quite clever, but not nearly as clever in that sense. Sorry, not far cleverer in that sense than he is in front of a camera, answering simple questions. Yeah.
that was it.
What kind of efforts are happening right now, Chris, to find them?
Right now, in Frederick Police Department, they've been on point. The officers, detectives, sergeants, K9 units here, they're getting sense. So hopefully they can pick up something and kind of go in a direction that will actually lead us to where maybe they're at right now.
And
Shanann went to. Where'd you get that shirt?
Oh.
So this is the moment of extraneous information. What I find so amazing is what happens in this last minute. They're wrapping up with this interview. The journalists are wrapping up, he's wrapping up, and this is when the vital information kind of leaks through. Some of them probably the most important information. It's basically the elephant in the room leaks through, and it comes through right at the end. And it starts off where the reporters start being casual. Let's talk about your shirt. Perhaps they've run out of things to say.
This is I think she got it off Amazon, but this is my favorite college sports team.
Wasn't she just there?
She was just in North Carolina. Yep. So she actually probably got it from there. Usually she gets stuff from Amazon, but this one, I like these shirts a lot.
You guys.
So there is a moment of giving out extraneous information. It's really not necessary for us to know how much he likes these shirts. What's also interesting, someone else mentioned this, he's kind of got at this moment, he's got his thumbs in his trousers. He's got both thumbs in his short pockets. And that is it's similar in a way to when you're wearing jeans and you stick your thumbs in those front jean pockets. It's kind of a masculine display to some extent. It's subconscious to some extent, but it's certainly, it's kind of part of that thing. And that is exactly who Chris Watts was at this point in time. He was a stud muffin. He thought he was a stud muffin. Kissinger thought he was a stud muffin. His colleagues were realizing what a buff guy he was. His wife was singing his praises and talking about his muscles and his physique and how Thrive was part of that. And that's very much part of his identity now. He's like, this is also the other Chris Watts, the other face to Chris Watts, which is the vain, handsome stud. And he's not used to that. And him standing out in front of the house telling the story is not his usual thing. Bear in mind, he didn't even want to be in the Thrive video. So, but he's trying to take it on. He's trying to evolve as a person as he evolved with Nicole Kissinger. But this is a little bit of extraneous information. And I see extraneous information is right now 26%. It's not the right answer, though. It's not the right answer. The right answer is what he doesn't say. And what doesn't he say in this is he doesn't talk about the fact that Shanann's pregnant. What's going on with Shanann? What's going on with the kids? What are you thinking about? Shanann's pregnant. I'm worried about her, like wherever she is. She was supposed to go to the doctor today. He doesn't mention that. He leaves that out. The other thing that he doesn't mention is having an affair. That's the other elephant in the room. And if you put those elephants together, Shanann's pregnant and I'm having an affair, and then you say, if he'd mentioned that, wouldn't you just automatically suspect him? And it would be totally natural to do that. That Shanann disappearing when she's pregnant in the middle of him having an affair and he's keeping that a secret as well, that's suspicious, right? So although, so the answer here is D, A and B, but B more than A, right? And what I think is interesting is in true crime, I see quite a few people who seem to think that it is what is obvious that is obvious. So there's someone that analyzed one of my videos or spoke about one of my videos, and he seems to think that everything that you can derive from a case, or not everything, but the bulk that you can derive from a case is what somebody says. And although I agree that you can get a substantial amount, I really don't think you can get enough or you can get a sufficient amount. And so let's say you use this as an example. Let's say you used the Sermon on the Porch, all aggregate 15 minutes of it, and you said, this is all we need to know from his own statements what this case is about. Well, he doesn't mention her being pregnant. That's really, really important. And he doesn't mention, I'm talking about in this particular statement, and he doesn't mention that he's having an affair. That's really, really, really important. Now, you can argue and say, well, he does eventually mention it. What I'm trying to say is statement analysis involves actually a lot of information, and there's a lot that's hidden from those statements. And maybe you're going to find them out if you pay attention to all of the narratives. But the important stuff is the stuff that is being hidden away, right? The important stuff is the stuff that's not being revealed. And how is the pregnancy revealed in this particular moment on the Sermon on the Porch? Well, right at the end. And that's what cuts the sermon short. That is what nixes the interview. Let's just watch the last minute of it.
You love your food. Describe your little girls to us, and
So Celeste, she's just a ball of energy. Call her Rampage, because she's just always, she's got two speeds, go or she's sleeping. And she's always a troublemaker. She's always the one like jumping off things, just yelling at you and all kinds of things. And Bella, she's the more calm, cautious, mothering type. And she's more like me. She's more calm. But Celeste has definitely got her mom's personality to where she's always just gung-ho, ready to go.
you guys have a baby on the way.
Mm-hmm.
You're about to have a third child.
Mm-hmm.
Is that kind of going through your mind right now too?
It's like that's why I want everybody back. That's why I need everybody back here. I need everybody safe.
And that's the end of it. Sorry, did I cut off the top of that?
You're about to have a third child.
Mm-hmm.
Is that kind of going through your mind right now too?
It's like that's why I want everybody back. That's why I need everybody back here. Mm-hmm. She's more like me. She's more calm. But Celeste has definitely got her mom's personality to where she's always just gung-ho, ready to go.
You guys have a baby on the way.
Mm-hmm.
You're about to have a third child.
Mm-hmm.
Is that kind of going through your mind?
So there's a really good example of not saying anything. So you've got a baby on the way. Mm-hmm. What is that like? Mm-hmm. He really doesn't want to talk about it. And probably at this moment, his heart's really exploding through his chest because this is the thing that he doesn't want anyone to know. And right at the end of the interview, it's come out. So this is also the moment the reporter plays his hand, right? And basically says, well, actually, I knew this all along. And anyway, it's at this point that the interview is over. The other thing that's a little bit of guilty knowledge showing is Chris Watts describing Shanann indirectly through Cece. And the last thing that he shows is this sort of motion. I can't really use my other arm because my dog's on it, but he basically kind of does that, right? And he's describing Celeste as gung-ho, I guess, but basically not calm. And do you think it's I'm not saying this is what I think of Shanann. I'm not saying it's what you should think of Shanann. It's what he thinks of Shanann. And do you think he thinks of her? Do you think it's a positive frame of reference? Because even I think he said, and I think Shanann said this as well, that he is a lot more like Bella, and that they have seen, I think, a closer relationship, right? And so is he referring to Shanann in a positive way, in the way that he refers to Cece?
Just in North Carolina. Yep. So she actually probably got it from there. Usually she gets stuff from Amazon, but this one, I like these shirts a lot.
You guys, you love your food. Describe your little girls to us, and
So Celeste, she's just a ball of energy. Call her Rampage, because she's just always, she's got two speeds, go or she's sleeping. And she's always a troublemaker. She's always the one like jumping off things, just yelling at you and all kinds of things. And Bella, she's the more calm, cautious, mothering type. And she's more like me. She's more calm. But Celeste has definitely got her mom's personality to where she's always just going. Her mom's personality to where she's always.
she's got a mom's personality where she's always just
gung ho, ready to go.
gung ho, ready to go. But I mean, the body language there is really telling you everything. She's like her mother, and then he kind of makes that sort of gesture. And he was likely in a very physical battle with Shanann. Shanann probably was trying to fight him off. His last memory of Shanann probably was fists and trying to push him off and beat him off her, and that's probably how he remembers her. Don't you get that idea?
There's a baby on the way.
Mm-hmm.
And you're about to have a third child.
Mm-hmm.
Is that kind of going through your mind?
So what I want you guys to look at now, we virtually at the end of this, what I want you to look at now is, what is his posture like in terms of, is he standing still? And the moment is asked about his wife being pregnant, doesn't he just start moving? The boat starts rocking. And again, it's just incredible seeing the self-soothing going on right in front of the camera. This is how bad he is at trying to control his own inner feelings. He's an introvert, and he's really not good at trying to just having a little bit of a certain amounts of complexity between what's going on inside and what's going on outside, right? So let's watch this again and just notice how he just suddenly starts swaying at the time that he's asked about Shanann being pregnant. Is he swaying when he's asked about his kids?
She was, just in North Carolina. Yep. So she actually probably got it from there. Usually she gets stuff from Amazon, but this one, I like these shirts a lot.
You guys, you love your trip. Describe your little girls to us, and
So Celeste, she's just a ball of energy. He is
swaying slightly, right?
She's just always
a little bit of
two speeds, go or she's sleeping.
But now it's not swaying.
Troublemaker. She's always the one like jumping off things, just yelling at you and all kinds of things. And Bella, she's the more calm, cautious, mothering type.
Bit more swaying now.
She's more like me. She's more calm. But Celeste has definitely got her mom's personality to where she's always just gung ho, ready to go.
There's a baby on the way.
Mm-hmm.
You're about to have a third child.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask you, we'll watch that again. Does he start swaying more or less or the same when a pregnancy is mentioned? Let's have a look.
She's more calm. But Celeste has definitely got her mom's personality to where she's always just gung ho, ready to go.
There's a baby on the way.
Mm-hmm.
You're about to have a third child.
Mm-hmm.
Is that kind of going through your mind right now too?
That's why I want everybody back. That's why I need everybody back here. I need everybody safe.
I think I'm good.
That's the end of it. Okay. So, yeah, there's definitely, he sways a lot, but he's definitely the most swaying possibly in the whole thing right at the end. And so, what do you guys think? Look, it's just my opinion, but my opinion is the right answer is D. And interestingly, the least of you voted for D. That also happens quite often. The right answer is D. What gives what's away? A and B, meaning lots of extraneous information, but what he doesn't say more than the extraneous information. What he doesn't say here is that Shanann's pregnant, right? You can't really expect him to say he's having an affair. Most people probably would want to keep that private, but in a rational situation, even if he was guilty, you would actually expect that he would say that she was pregnant. And he does say it to the cop when he's in front of the video with Trinastich. He does mention it there, only when a picture flashes on the screen next to him. So to those who picked D, well done. Shane picked D. I know the Drunken Tarot did, and a couple of others of you. But it's important to remember that there's a lot of subtlety in true crime, and in a way we are taught to recognize the unsubtle. There are so many videos that I see from other true crime creators that are all about how shocking something is and how absolutely clear something is, and then it turns out it's not that way either. That that Brian Koberg is a serial killer. No, he's not. That Rex Heuermann must have dead bodies in South Carolina and Vegas. No, it's actually more likely that he doesn't. There are these very overt, shocking things that we led to expect and believe, but things aren't that simple or that easy or that simple. It's a lot more complicated and a lot more subtle. And to the extent that we taught to think about the world in unsubtle ways, we're going to be manipulated because things just aren't that obvious. And just trying to think. Anyway, so I want to go into the interview that the District Attorney Rourke gave. I'm going to take these out. I'm a little nervous doing this because a couple of other channels who did this got copyright strikes. And I'm not going to play any of the audio, but I'm still a little bit nervous because it's definite. There's some elements of this case that are really toxic, but anyway. So let's just have a look at some of your comments. DMC says, what do women think of him? Is he attractive? And that's from, looks like a guy asking that question. Okay, so in a episode of, I think it's called Survivor's Guide to True Crime, it's a podcast. This actually came out quite a long time ago, but Rourke is interviewed, I think, by his wife. He begins speaking about the Watts case at around 48 and a half minutes into the podcast. And he talks about other things as well, and then he's done about 18 to 20 minutes later. On the one hand, Rourke's version of events rings true, and it's incredibly touching, right? The story that he tells rings true, it sounds authentic, it's moving. I'd like to even show you the podcast and provide you a link, but I'm just there's so much sensitivity around it that I'm just not going to do that. You're gonna just have to rely on guys are welcome to search for it, but for now you're gonna have to just rely on what I say about it. I believe him when he calls the Watts case one of the worst of his entire career. Note, he doesn't say it's the worst, he says one of the worst. Also, I personally appreciate his support for Nicole Kessinger. And that is something he expresses in those 20 minutes. Personally, I feel if we've learned anything in true crime, there are far, far worse mistresses and paramours that have come along since Kessinger, and they didn't get a fraction of the bad press she did. I think an example of someone who I don't want to say is far worse, just that if you compare Jeff Libler in the Barry Morphew case, Suzanne Morphew case, he never came forward at all. The police had to find him, and they only found him kind of by luck because Suzanne had a spy pen, which is not something everybody has with them. And the spy pen contained a recording, which I think she may have recorded accidentally. I think the spy pen was actually intended to help Suzanne broker her own divorce. I think the spy pen was possibly intended to catch Barry out having an affair, and instead it caught her out. It was a big surprise at the time. But the point is, it was thanks to the spy pen that the police were able to figure out that she was having an affair. And because he never came forward. And then they spoke to him, and then he cooperated, but he certainly didn't help that case get where it needed to go in the way that Kissinger did. And Kissinger came forward, I think, earlier on the Wednesday, and the same day they nailed Watts and it was case closed. Think about how quickly the Watts case was done and dusted. Basically, you might think confessions are common or usual. They're not. And the Watts case was all over, bar the shouting, basically late Wednesday night, right? Think about, that's like within about 3 days. Think about how long it took in terms of the Brian Koberger case. It's more than a year later. And so many other cases that drag on for months and months and years, right? So on the other hand, a couple of things that I liked that Rourke said, but on the other hand, I'm not sure if Rourke is really telling the full story when he talks about what he talks about. And this is, I'll explain what I mean by that. I'm not questioning whether he's telling the truth. I think he's telling the truth, but I think he's leaving something out. In other words, I think what he doesn't say is the thing to pay attention to. And again, I'm speculating, but he talks about he didn't want the Watts case to be a death penalty case, right? Because he felt like that was something that wasn't achievable. In other words, if they pursued the death penalty, within a couple of months, the Colorado state would take that out of the Constitution anyway, and it would just create kind of a in other words, they would be fighting for something that would be legally unworkable anyway. Do you get what I'm trying to say? But if you think about it, that's fine. It's fine. It's understandable if the death penalty route should be off the table, right? But you don't have to say, okay, in order for there not to be a death penalty, you then don't have a trial whatsoever. I'm not sure if I follow the thinking where you say, we're going to go and have a conversation and discuss taking the death penalty off the table. Okay, you can do that, but then why not have a trial? That's the part that I think kind of needs to be addressed head on. What is wrong with having a trial? I don't think there's any question about what's been convicted. Like, I don't think there's any question of him getting away with what he did. I don't think there's any question that that he wasn't going to be sentenced appropriately. I don't think there's anything to do with that. So why not have a trial? Now, I accept that it makes complete sense, again, not to pursue a death penalty prosecution, but why on earth would you want to let him, this man of all criminals, off the hook of standing trial for his crimes? I mean, we watch him speaking over here, but there's a lot that we didn't really know, and it was only found out, even some of the statements Rourke made, for example, that Bella's lip, sorry to be so graphic, but that Bella's lip had been injured when Chris Watts did something to her. I think it was injured when she was placed through the hatch. That's when I think it happened. So, you know, there are a lot of things that are not necessarily accurate. That's not really an example of something where I'd really want accuracy. It's things like what is really going on with Shanann's income. When did the affair really start? Right, things like that. And what does the drunken tarot say? A trial would have given a lot of closure. Yeah, that's the great value that the trial could have done. is it could have addressed a lot of things in the proper forum, right? It could have also dealt with, you could have had an expert talking about, to some extent, the impact of social media on Chris Watts, on Shanann, on the kids, on everything. Isn't that an important conversation for all of us to be having, especially if you've got families, especially if you've got children? In other words, if you're trying to talk about his criminal psychology, his motive, what broke the connection that he must have had at one point with his family. It wasn't just Nicole Kessinger. And it wasn't just Shanann going to North Carolina. It was also, I think, if someone is on social media constantly in a way that is sometimes not fun, especially if you're an introvert, what kind of impact can that have on you? And I'm someone who's a social media creator, and I'm aware of the strain that it can put on a relationship. I remember once I was at a party, and I said to my girlfriend, "We've got to go now. I've got a live schedule. It's definitely not something that can, if you're too committed to it, it can really be a bummer, right?" Shanann was very committed to it. And so why was Chris Watts let off the hook of standing trial for his crimes? And so I think in the same way that Rourke says, why not just get a divorce? Let's just put up a couple of other images here. Why? Let me just put that up on screen. Why, why not just get a divorce? That's what Rourke said at one point about Chris Watts. Why don't you just get a divorce? In the same tone, I would also say, why not just have Watts stand trial? He's committed a very serious crime. He should have to be in court and be held accountable in a courtroom, but not a less than 1 hour ticking of the box thing. He needs to be accountable for one of the worst crimes in Colorado ever. How did it happen? What can we learn from it? What was playing into all those events, right? And so I remember when I covered the Watts case, and at times I felt like an outlier. I felt like, I'm just telling you how I felt. I felt like someone trying to provide a voice of reason, not being paranoid in this area or blaming someone in that area. I wanted to provide a voice of reason anchored in facts and reality, right? And part of the reason why I think people found my coverage of it worthwhile was because some of that was missing. We would have had that in a trial. A trial would have provided a legal voice of reason anchored in the legal reality of the case. And that was something that was very much needed. And so there was a lot of unhinged hysteria. And I remember thinking how much good this case would do America if it was given an airing in court as a high-profile crime. And haven't you guys thought about that as well? How much, if this case had been discussed in the proper place, which is a courtroom, this is a murder, triple homicide, arguably a quadruple, it really should have been talked about in a courtroom. And how much good that could have done for other families struggling with the same thing. Maybe you're also into multi-level marketing and you're struggling. Maybe you also have got to negotiate a divorce and it's difficult, right? Maybe you're tempted to have an affair, maybe you shouldn't. Maybe there are other things to think about, such as what's the word for it? The distance that the well should be from a house, and safety protocols like that as they affect the oil industry. Maybe these are also conversations worth having, in terms of keeping your community healthy and safe and looked after, but at kind of like the family level, right? So much good could have come out of it. The impact of social media on families, couples, and children, the impact of multi-level marketing on families, how much can you really earn, how much was Shanann really earning, the health narrative with regard to, let's say, Thrive, the health narrative with regard to lupus. There's still a lot of confusion with regard to that. Did Shanann really have lupus? Was CC really allergic to peanuts? That could have been another conversation. But lupus is a very misunderstood disease. There's some people in chat right now that suffer from lupus. There's also the opioid aspect. Shanann had, I think, quite a lot of strong painkillers, oxycodone in her basement. That's something else that could have been discussed. Let's not forget Watts originally tried to stop the pregnancy by overdosing Shanann with OxyContin. And then, of course, there's the oil narrative. A lot of people forget the following as a background to the whole thing of the Watts case. In 2018, Occidental Petroleum was in talks to take over Anadarko, the company that Chris Watts and Nicole Kessinger worked for. The company where that effectively had a stake in where the remains were buried. And so you could also talk about how can an employee gain access to a site like this with no safety, security, no surveillance. And so you could have had a really important conversation about the safety, security, and management of these well sites. That could have come under discussion as well. And it's an open question. Could that have done a lot of good if it was? And so I'm wondering why this case didn't go to trial. Was it because it was politically very sensitive? Was it because it was something that Chris Watts simply wanted to avoid, that he didn't want to go to trial? Or was it something else? What is the reason this case really didn't go to trial? And please don't tell me it was just because of the taking the death penalty off the table. And even if Chris Watts didn't want the spectacle of a trial, I really don't think you should be giving him what he wanted. You should be doing what is right by the family on the one hand, and also, not just one family, but all the families on both sides, and then also in terms of the community, right? This was a case with very high public interest, and telling the truth, having the truth demonstrated, and showing accountability would have been, I think, very good for the public interest. You have faith now in public institutions. You have faith in the transparency of the justice process instead of the opposite. So what else do I want to say here? For me, the Watts case revealed how an ordinary, nondescript American, Chris Watts, could commit the most heinous crime imaginable, because he really does seem like an ordinary guy. But perhaps even worse than this were the shrieking flocks baying for blood and trying to make the case even worse than it already was. For me, the most disturbing part of the Chris Watts case actually wasn't the Chris Watts case. It was other people other people's reaction to the Chris Watts case and what it showed about them. For me, the witch hunt for Nicole Kessinger, to me, that wasn't about Kessinger's flaws. She is a flawed person, but it was the witch hunt for Nicole Kessinger. From where I sat covering this case, and you may remember, Kessinger even mentioned one of my blog posts to CBI agent Kevin Kovac in a text in sometime in August. What I saw was just how much evil there is in our society. And it's not something I wanted to see. It was something that I felt the Watts case exposed. And one of the ways that it exposed that, from where I'm sitting, most YouTube creators couldn't be trusted to tell this story honestly. Do you guys agree with that or not? That would you say the average YouTube creator told the story honestly? In other words, they were fact-based, or did they entertain? Maybe Chris Watts didn't commit the crime. Maybe it was this person. Maybe Chris Watts didn't commit this crime. Maybe it was that person. Maybe Chris Watts had help with this one. Maybe Chris Watts had help with this one, and that one. And all these different alternatives, just keeping that ball rolling, right? Shane says not most. Okay. Not most. Okay. So someone who wrote a book about the case plagiarized someone else's work. Many in the public, if not most, wanted to compound the tragedy by either going after an innocent woman or after the victim's family, or both. And so it kind of felt like salivating wolves. So what's happened is already bad enough. What's happened with the Watts family is already horrific and tragic. But now to compound that tragedy, people are coming out like salivating wolves. And that's why I say this story exposed society's sadism. DMC says, will you write a book on the case? Okay, well, I guess you're new to me and this channel. Anyone want to chime in there? Timmy, are you snoring? So I have written a book on the case. It's this book, right? That was the first book I wrote, The Man Underneath Christopher Watts, and it came out quite early. It came out September 10, 2018. It came out just less than a month after the crime. And then I went on to write a series of 9 books. And the highest rated is Drilling Through Discovery. That's pretty highly rated. And then I ended up writing 9 books in total. And what I was trying to do is tell the definitive story, almost as the Lawrence Schiller, the guy who wrote the book on the John Benet Ramsey case. Do I have it here? I almost, I guess, wanted to be the Lawrence Schiller of the Chris Watts case, where you basically provide an exhaustive detail without it being gratuitous, without it being whatever, the true story. It's available in a narrated form on Patreon. So if you go to Patreon, it's available there. Okay, what else do I want to say? So in the absence of a trial, a lot of opportunists came out and ran amok, and we came to see the biggest loser in the Watts case was us. Do you agree with that, like in hindsight, that the biggest loser in the Watts case, just in terms of this case came out and almost everybody lost? There wasn't really real justice. in the way that we'd expect it to be. You might say the DA did a great job and they got a very quick, easy result. But there's a saying I've heard so often in courtrooms: justice must be done, but it must also be seen to be done. And I don't really feel like that's the case here. And as I can tell, there many of you still don't like Nicole Kessinger. You still think that she deserves X, Y, or Z. She's one of the biggest losers of all. You know, she's lost her life. She's lost her name. I guess she lost her job. She lost, I think, her home, and she had an affair. The same didn't happen to Jeff Libler. The same didn't happen to what's her name, Crystal Kenny in the Patrick Frazee case. The same didn't happen to, and on and on and on. And so that's why it was important that the proper facts were presented. So if you guys wanna read this book, I think I'm gonna need to shorten it. If you guys want a link to this book, I'll just put it in chat, unless Stephanie beats me to it. This is a link to the first book in the series, and then this is a link to all 9. Terry's gifted 1 True Crime Rocket Science membership. Thanks a lot for that, Terry. Okay, and so the last thing I want to say is we are a society that seems to be destroying itself from within. I was actually talking to someone else about this. And in this sense, we're not that different from Chris Watts. We're just as two-faced as he is. And until we can admit this, we're just as bad and capable of evil as he is as well. So in other words, when you can acknowledge that there's another side to you, when you can acknowledge your elephants in the room, when you can acknowledge your secrets, then you can establish a sense of congruency between one extreme side of yourself and the other, right? And I'm interested in healing our society, not aggravating the faults and flaws and cracks and weaknesses that are already there. I'm not here to sadistically benefit out of fear mongering and whatever. I'm trying to heal society authentically through authenticity, through understanding what's really going on. Through when you can figure out, for example, what was going on in this case, maybe you can figure out what's going on in your life, right? That's really the idea. And so you kind of got to hold yourself to some kind of standard as well. And that's why I say, in a sense, we're not that different to Chris Watts. I mean, thank God we are probably a little bit more sophisticated than he is, and most of us probably lack the capacity to do what he did. But to some extent, all of us have 2 sides to us. It's absolutely innate. You've got a public side and a private side. And it's not to say that you shouldn't have a private side. It's just that your public and private side should be congruent. They shouldn't be completely mismatched, right? And so how can you tell, this is quite important to emphasize, how can you tell if you're talking to someone whether they're lying? And what do we learn from the Chris Watts case that educates us in that respect? Well, the one answer is, if there's a mismatch between what they're saying, right, what they're saying and how they're saying it, the effect, right? So in other words, if someone is saying that something really disturbed them or worried them or touched them or meant something to them or made them feel angry or whatever, and there's not a corresponding feeling that goes along with that, there's something that you need to pay attention to there. There's a mismatch there that could be a serious problem, right? So in other words, the expressions and the effect not matching the words, that's already showing someone who is possibly so two-faced that they're very hypocritical and dishonest. That's the one thing you want to look out for. The other thing you want to look out for is what they are not saying. If you're talking to someone and you realize, wow, why are we not talking about that? I don't know if you've ever noticed you're talking to someone or someone's being interrogated, or perhaps a politician is talking, and you're realizing what they need to be talking about is XYZ, but they insist on talking about ABC. That's also a serious problem. Bex in Wonderland, welcome to. You're going to see a little birthday video that I did on my birthday in the members only section. Right, and so I want to encourage you guys to be honest about your own two-facedness, which is basically to say there's a side to myself that I'm aware of that I don't like or that I think I could improve on. Now, there's a side of myself that I'm very happy with, but that's not where the work lies. The work lies on the side that needs work, right? The side that deserves to be shone in the light a little bit. And it's that stuff that you don't want to talk to people about. For example, where what says, if you're doing that, if someone is talking to you and you are doing that, that's something you maybe want to pay attention to. And I made a kind of an equation not that long ago, which I really think is a very interesting, very simple way of understanding ourselves, but also true crime. On the one side, you write the word neglect. And on the other side, you write the words keeping up appearances. And to the extent that both of those things are taking place, you are kind of heading for disaster. To the extent that you keep I sound a bit like Patsy Ramsey in that CNN interview. To the extent that you keeping up appearances, in other words, that you are investing in your public face, something is being neglected. The other side of you is being neglected. And it's that area that really needs your attention, that needs work. Probably it's some private side of you. Probably it's got to do with how you feel about something, how you feel about someone, how maybe you feel about yourself. That maybe needs work. And to the extent that the keeping up appearances is taking away from whatever you're neglecting, you should really stop keeping up those appearances, right? And I'm increasingly feeling, to the same extent that anxiety is a potential answer to every single crime that is committed, that anxiety in a certain way explains the entire story. I think neglect is another thing that you can interpret often a lot of an entire case just through this thing of neglect. And what was neglected in the Chris Watts story? Well, Chris Watts neglected who he really was. Chris Watts didn't really get to know who he really was. Chris Watts was kind of an introvert. He was used to just doing as he was told. He was used to not thinking critically about his own life and his own self. And so when he did do that, it made a total mess. And so in order to have an identity that's resilient, that's in tune with who you really are, that's going to, be happy and balanced, and where you found your place in the world. That is, after all, our job on this earth, is as you become a teenager and as you graduate into adulthood, you're supposed to find your niche, make your place in the world. You can't do that without having found and figured out your identity. If you don't know who you are, no one else is going to know. And I think one of the reasons Chris Watts gave up on himself, even, he confessed to what he did. He threw in the towel on his own scheme. One of the reasons why Chris Watts basically gave up the ghost as quickly as he did was because he had no real sense of self, or a very, very fragile sense of self. He thought that his appearance, that him having muscles and looking quite fit and attractive was enough. It wasn't. It was just one face to him. That was quite a long speech. Barbara Collins says, I'm attuned, maybe because I'm a writer. Well, Barbara, are you a famous writer? Isn't there someone Collins that's a really well-known writer? So I'm going to end off by just reviewing some of your comments. There you go. That's a great one. Chelsea Whitaker. No matter where you go, there you are. And, if you think about it, the best place to start working on something is yourself, because you are under your own control. Blaming someone else or pointing the finger at somebody else only really turns you into a victim. When you blame yourself, when you hold yourself responsible, when you hold yourself accountable, that's where you can make real changes and your life can really improve. And it's really easy and tempting to say that whatever is someone else's fault, and it may even be true, but you can't do anything about that. You can't control somebody else. You can control yourself. You can control how you respond, how you adapt, how you change, how you improve, how you learn, how you become more resilient. You can control all those things. But it's a choice you've got to make if you pay attention to what you're neglecting. Let's have a look at some of your other comments. I'm not surprised. Okay, thanks for that, Stephanie. Although I think that's at Barbara Collins. Okay. I thought that was a compliment to me. One book. Which book did you write? You Cannot Run Away from You. Okay. Yeah, Joan Collins. Any relation to Joan? Rando writes the following. Unfortunately, there can be no doubt that man is on the whole less good than he imagines himself or wants to be. And as soon as you accept that, then life becomes a lot easier and better. It's that saying, I think in the book A Road Less Traveled by M. Scott Peck, he says, life is hard. It's a great truth, because once you accept that, it actually becomes a lot easier, right? Chelsea says, thanks, everyone. We had a lovely and respectful chat. I'm glad everyone was respectful. Oh, thanks. Thanks for that, Stephanie. I must say, I find myself often reaching for words. Like I know what I want to say. I've got an idea what the word is, but I'm definitely rustier than I was when I was writing books constantly. Thought Criminal says, I'll work on being less passive. Okay. So what are we talking about when we talk about a two-face? We're talking about someone who's very incongruent. And I've known a couple of two-faces in my life. I actually have got one in my mind right now, someone I've got to deal with who doesn't live too far from me. And he will tell you one thing to your face, and then he'll go and do something else. And he's the guy who cut down quite a few trees. And I said to him, look, if you're going to do this, just let me know. And yes, no, I'll let you know. or he would say, I just want to cut a few small little branches. Is that okay? And then he'd cut down like half the tree, or like half a branch the size of my arm, things like that. And you sort of realize they are that way for a reason, because it benefits them. In other words, they can be very political and very what's the word? They can say things, they can lie to people, and people hold them in a particular esteem if they're not checked in what they're saying. And so everybody likes them because they're telling everyone what they want to hear. Until someone, thanks a lot for that, Maria. Appreciate that. Boat Life says, the road less traveled. I really recommend that book. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's also a very good book. People of the Lie rescued me from that as a teenager. But I mean, a very simple way to not be two-faced is to be honest, to be authentic, to try and be as close to who you really are as possible. So if someone asks you something and you know they're not going to like the answer, you nevertheless try and tell them your truth, maybe in a slightly softer or gentler way. The other side is also not right, to be brutally honest. Like to go around and just spread your honesty around. You should be aware of social graces and be aware that what you say could hurt other people, could alienate other people, could offend other people, right? So thanks a lot for that. I appreciate it. You will notice that I often get punished in true crime for my authenticity. People that take a certain route, if I don't take it, I don't get those views. But I feel like it's a more valuable thing that I'm trying to do, and that is to me more value than, I guess, money or whatever, popularity. We're in an area that's really something I care about, which is justice, truth, reality, And I think if you've been misled by a couple of people in your life, you care more about those things as well, Barbara says, I need to hear this. Okay. Molly Cuddle says, I do believe COVID made us less trusting as a society afterward. I know that has nothing to do with this case. I must say, I wonder what would have happened if let's say, Shanann wasn't killed, the kids weren't killed, for whatever reason, Chris Watts just changed his mind, right? And nothing happened. I wonder what would have happened during COVID when Chris Watts couldn't have gone to work. I just wondered. I'm just curious about that. Okay, so that's it from me. I think I'm going to put my dog down. Timmy, say goodbye. We might go for another epic walk. The sun is just about coming. I think the sun is actually up already. We might just go for an epic walk. By the way, some of you know I had a birthday recently. I found this in my travel luggage. These are those chocolate-covered, what do they call them? Chocolate-covered espresso beans from Starbucks. If anyone wants to send me some of these, my packet is half empty. Some of you might say it's half full, but it's definitely even more than half empty than it's half full. That would be cool, because we don't have that at our Starbucks here, as far as I know. And they really are good for perking you up. They're pretty good. Okay, Thought Criminal says, "Oh, happy belated birthday." How does Study feel? What is the temperature here? Let's have a look. It's 14 degrees Celsius. What's that in Fahrenheit? I'd say it's about 68, 65. Oh, it's 57. But it's going to go up to probably, well, let's have a look. It's going to go up to a maximum of around about, let's say, roughly 82. So that's the weather here. Okay, and so the last thing I want to put on screen is this. And it's kind of a description of sadism. Pleasure is sweetest when it's paid for by another's pain. And that's kind of what Chris Watts was going through. I think the fact that he was cheating on his family, right, with this other woman, the fact that it was so almost taboo made it that much more delicious for him. And probably for Kissinger as well. She knew that there was a time limit on this affair because as soon as his wife came back, so she knew that as well. And I think that is what the pain that the family were kind of going through. They didn't even know why they were going through it. Even Shanann actually said to Chris Watts at a certain point, because he was complaining that they weren't paying any attention to him and that they weren't connecting with him. And she said something like, "Give it time." But the problem was also he wasn't connecting with them, right? He was on his phone. He had his mistress on his mind. And that is something that is another description for sadism. And we've got to be careful when that's taking place. It takes place quite a lot on YouTube. It takes place quite a lot in true crime. We must be careful to note whether we are enjoying something at somebody else's expense, because that's another sign of being a two-face. Are you enjoying something because it's enjoyable, or are you enjoying something because someone else isn't? And I mean, that's a way to really get to authentic living. You enjoy something by yourself. You enjoy something because you've earned it. You enjoy something because you've done it. You enjoy something on its own merits, not because of someone else, being done in some way. That's an awful quote. Yeah, but it's nevertheless true. And you've got to, think about that in terms of all of these mistresses and all of these affairs, and then what comes out at the end of that, right? So it's just something to be conscious of. In terms of the two-faced thing. How do I enjoy myself, right? Malster says, as a woman, I can be a bit too hard on women. Why do women have affairs? Because they're not married and it's envy, right? I don't know if you know this, Nicole Kissinger's friend was about to get married, and you can tell how she would have felt envious just of being married, being settled, having kids. Okay. Is there anything else I need to communicate to you guys? I think that's it. Have you guys watched my video on CalPol? in terms of the Madeleine McCann thing. Have you guys watched that? Stephanie, I'm not going to give my address in chat, so I'm not going to do that just here or just now. Thanks a lot for wanting to send coffee beans. I'm not quite sure how we're going to do that. Probably not going to do that. This might sound like bad news, but I'm probably not going to do additional analysis on the Watts case. I've done so much. I've written 12 books, so I'm really not going to take it any further. Yeah, I'll get a truckload of coffee beans. Oh, that's good to hear. That's good to hear. I probably need to talk about although I don't even think CalPol's that relevant, but I probably need to talk about how CalPol was developed and how it was discontinued, because there's a lot of misinformation about CalPol, that it never contained antihistamine, that nothing about it makes you drowsy, and it's just, there's a lot of misinformation about it. So are you telling me that a generation of British parents gave something to their kids because it didn't make them drowsy? It's just a ridiculous thing to say. Anyway, Gemma says, have you done any videos on your theory of the ultimate plan? Which case are you talking about? The Chris Watts case? Yes, I think the best book to read in terms of that is the last book, Silver Fox Post-Truth. That is, I think, the best book to read. The importance of reading the other books is to see how the narrative developed, how the one built on the other. I just want to see if I can find Post-Truth. Or am I going to have to search for it? There it is. So I'm not sure if I've said this before in a YouTube video. Speaking about, so it's almost like how to not be a two-face. Well, say something about yourself that's not really a compliment, that doesn't put you necessarily in a very good light. So I'll go first. I couldn't believe that Chris Watts, what does Catherine say? I couldn't believe that Chris Watts took his kids to the well site alive. I just thought that doesn't make any sense. It's stupid. It's just doesn't. And criminals don't always think in a rational way. Criminals don't always do the smartest thing. And in the same way that's true, although I think it's smarter for Chris Watts to have waited for Shanann to arrive, and I believe that is what happened. It is possible that he killed her in their bedroom. It's possible. It's another alternative. And anyway, even when I saw those shadows in the driveway, I thought, I think it's a trick of the light. It's the way the different lights showing, you know, he is bending over, he could be picking up something else. So for a very long time, I refused to believe that the kids were still alive. And only when I literally, I was going to make a video showing how the lights can distort. And I got a little car and I shone a light on it. And I was trying to prepare the presentation when I actually realized it wasn't possible for for a shadow to be moving like that and him to be picking it up. And so I even had to, what's the word? Correct my thinking and correct the way I was projecting, I guess, into the case and see things the way that they were. And even though I was so committed to telling the truth of this case, I was even misled in something that was quite simple. And although it still is inexplicably crazy that Chris Watts would take his kids to the well site and they're still alive, that does appear to be what he did. And there's the camera footage showing it. But like I say, people don't always act rationally, and there's some people who take their own lives, and there's a lot of irrationality built into that. People aren't thinking in a rational way. The important thing is that in their own minds, it is rational, and that's the part we sometimes try to understand. Not rationalize and not sympathize with it, but get the insanity that nevertheless makes sense to them, right? And so I tried to do that with the Rex Huerman case recently, where I was just saying, what is the source of this guy's sadism, if it's present? And could it have something to do with the architecture of Massapequa Park? And it's not saying, wow, it makes complete sense that you think this way. It's understanding what could have driven elements of the criminal psychology. It's trying to understand the criminal mind without not being supportive of it, simply saying that is likely what he was thinking, if that makes sense. Okay, I think I've said all I need to say. Okay, well, I see there's still a lot of you who have different opinions on that. If you want to see my opinion with links and explanations, read Silver Fox. Probably worth looking at. Can I briefly discuss Scott Peterson? Scott Peterson's got quite a strong potential claim to innocence in the sense that the only evidence they found of Lacey Peterson was a hair in a yellow needle-nosed pliers in the boat. And if you compare the Scott Peterson case right now to the Jennifer Dulos case, there's so much evidence in that case. If you compare the Scott Peterson case to the Suzanne Morphew case, there's so much evidence, right? And yet Scott Peterson was convicted largely on the strength of Amber Frey's recordings and testimony. And so if you take that away, I don't think there's much doubt about what happened. But in terms of proving something, it's not that easy to do. And it does look like they're going to be fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting, and we'll see what happens. Yeah, I must say, so many of the cases I hear about that are taken upon by the Innocent Project, I'm like, I don't know if you guys know, I've written 3 books on the Scott Peterson case, and that's one sort of area or crime scene I really wanted to visit when I was in California. And I sort of did. I went to San Francisco. I went over the bridge. I went to what's it, Obispo? How does that thing go? Something Obispo, which is close to where they studied. What's that place called in California? Is it San Luis Obispo? Anyway, I was kind of in that area, and but I never went to Modesto. I never went to the house. I would have liked to, because that case, I was going to write about 5 books on that case. The fourth book would have been called Weight of the World, and it was going to be about the Scott Peterson trial. So there were many books that I was busy writing, and then other cases came along. But the Scott Peterson case, I was going to write 5 books on, which is a major undertaking, and I got as far as I finished three books ultimately. Yeah, that's right. That's right. And there was a period where they actually thought that Scott Peterson may have been involved in that, or that the person who did that did something to Lacey. There was a thing about that as well. I found the Kristen Smart case really incredible in terms of police work, in terms of that you can sometimes solve a cold case. I remember when I was at San Luis Obispo with my friend Webb, we saw a family of otters. It was really one of the highlights of visiting California. We just saw this family of otters at dusk, just lazing in this pool right in front of the car park. Yeah, there is a lot of similarity to that. And do you remember that Nicole Kessinger Googled something about Amber Frey? Like one of the very last things in the phone data review was Nicole Kessinger Googling Amber Frey. Do you remember that? Yeah. That I must say did have a ring of truth to it, didn't it? A horrible ring of truth to it. Molly Cuddle says, I got to run, but we'll listen. Love to you all. Be well. I'm about to sign off, so. Gemma says, I lived in San Francisco for 15 years. I could have seen Scott if I wanted to, but I was too scared. Okay. What's interesting in the Scott Peterson case is the role of dogs. The dog in the story of where she supposedly went, and also the way dogs were used to find her, to track her and all that kind of thing. I didn't really know dogs can smell on a roadside. I didn't know that dogs could smell cadavers in water. But I remember having to really study ocean currents, weather patterns, and what happens underwater, and I feel like I need to go back to San Francisco, because it's also where Mo Wilson did mountain biking. I think she also stayed in that area, so I sort of feel like I only went there very quickly. Went in there, there's a rainstorm, took a photo and went out, so I sort of feel like I need to go back. Let's go through last couple of comments. The other thing with Scott Peterson is he staged calls as well, right? And kind of left them on an answering machine. Helena says, I was really into walking my dog when the Lacey Peterson came out. Okay, that's sad to hear. I don't actually think she was walking her dog when it happened. I think that was staged. Chelsea says, some things you do for money and some you do for fun, but the things you do for love are going to come back to you one by one. Well, Chelsea, you've got some good quotes there. Bab says, I'll never forget the day that happened. Yeah. I must say, there's something similarly grotesque about the Lacey Peterson case as there is with the John Benet Ramsey case, because both of them happen around Christmas time. So you kind of have this strange thing of a little perfect postcard of America that you have in the John Benet Ramsey case, you have with the Scott Peterson case, this perfect little couple. Lacey's pregnant, they stay in this nice little house. He's handsome, she's sweet and pretty, and then you have this horrific thing taking place, the most horrific thing that can happen, and you have this feeling that could the person that is the closest to you be your worst enemy, which is a horrible thought to have. Could the person that you love the most, that is the closest to you, be a Scott Peterson or a Chris Watts or who knows? And that's why I say it's so important to know that you're dealing with a two-face, and if you're the two-face, to try and resolve parts of you that are incongruent, right? But how do you identify a two-face? Well, someone who has a mismatch to what they're saying, to what they're feeling. And remember all those interviews Scott Peterson gave where he just didn't look believable. Even when he seemed to be grieving, it just didn't look right. And then the other thing is, it's the elephant in the room. What are you not saying? One of the things that we knew about Scott Peterson was that he had serious financial problems. He was struggling. He was a fertilizer salesman, and he was struggling to hit his targets. He wasn't doing very well. He wasn't a successful salesman. And he kind of had a similar thing going on a little bit to Barry Morphy, in the sense that he once upon a time wanted to be a professional golfer. That was kind of his daydream. That was how he imagined his life to be. I'm not sure if Barry Morphew thought he was going to become a professional athlete in some way, but Barry Morphew certainly, when he met Suzanne, was a sporting celebrity. Let's put it that way. The other thing that's very interesting between Scott Peterson and Chris Watts is that they were both kind of mama's boys. They were both golden child kids. What I'm saying is their parents kind of almost idolized their children. Their parents kind of thought that they can do no wrong, and would believe in them and love them no matter what. And that may be also why they thought they could get away with something. Because it's like, well, my parents will never suspect me. And if your parents will never suspect you of something, you think nobody else would either. The crazy thing with the Scott Peterson case was, if you're going to say that Scott Peterson didn't want to be a father, if you're going to say Scott Peterson was unhappy that Lacey was pregnant, well, Amber Frey had a child, and he was sort of, I think he took that child to school. So it wasn't like he was getting rid of one family in order just to have an affair. right? That's a slightly different dimension in terms of that aspect. So I also think the financial aspect played a big role in Scott Peterson's story. Yes, Amber had a daughter. I think so as well. And, you know, mollycoddling is something that's been coming up in true crime, certainly from my side, talking about it. I spoke about it in the Lucy Letby case, and people were appalled. I'm quite aware of how much I mollycoddle my dog, and it's not good for people. It's better to teach resilience. It's better to teach someone how to be themselves and how to be kind of not on their own, but mollycoddling doesn't help a child or an animal. There's got to be a certain amount of care and love and a certain amount of discipline in terms of that, where you don't have to convince someone of what the real world is like, because the real world will do that. But mollycoddling certainly doesn't prepare someone for the real world. Yeah, well, you heard it first here, right? Yeah, it does. It does. Yeah, good point. Good point. And what I find really interesting in the way I cover true crime is how you find all these patterns intertextually. Can I ask you guys a question? I was thinking about it the other day. Have you guys come across any other channel that uses that word intertextually? That's a word that, although I didn't invent the word intertextual, I'm the first person that I know of that used it in relation to true crime, and I use it quite frequently. Have you guys come across any other channel that you've heard saying that's intertextual to that? I'd just be interested. If you do, let me know. I would be quite interested. I only hear you say it. Okay, well, you heard it here first. We'll see if it'll ever catch on. No other channel uses that term. Okay. So that is a true crime rocket science-ism, right? I'm mentioning it here in January 2024. So if you, from this point onward, someone does use it, you know it's kind of been copyrighted by me, by us, by this channel. So if you hear anyone saying it, you know they've not stolen it, but they've appropriated it from the most authentic channel in true crime. How's that? Yeah, it is amazing, isn't it? And I think some people think intertextuality only means words. I'm broadening the meaning to mean the fabric of one thing to the fabric of something else, right? In other words, true crime, the proper way to refer to it is true crime intertextuality or criminal intertextuality. Yeah. Okay, there we go. There we go. Yeah, no, definitely. Copyright. So if you're on any other channel and you hear that word, you probably won't, but if you do, copyright. That's my biggest smile so far tonight, right? What's that about taking pleasure in something else, right? Okay, anyway. No, cross-textual isn't like cross-dressing. That's not right. Chelsea says, I love that word now. Okay. It is. Okay, so that's it from me. I'm going to try and slowly start setting up my outro. Can we put in another image here? Let's put in that picture. Thanks everyone for being here. And yeah, if you haven't watched that video on CalPol, check it out. I might be doing the next video I want to do on Madeleine McCann are the 3 biggest kind of what the ifs in that case. I was just thinking about a couple of things that in the Madeleine McCann case are just absolutely crazy. And so that's what I kind of want to do next, but I think I need to deal with the CalPol thing in a little bit more detail. So maybe I'll do that. Yeah, that's also a good word. Okay. Mods, thanks for being here. Members, new members, welcome. Remember, audiobooks, all those books I mentioned here are available in audiobook on Patreon. I think there's even a Scott Peterson book that's on Patreon as an audiobook. And there are 3 books on Scott Peterson. They are Night Eternal. Geez, I can't even remember their titles. Night Eternal. What are the others? Well, there are quite a few books out there with that title. Can you believe it when you can't remember your own book titles? Blood and Seawater and Night Before Christmas. Yeah, that's these. I'll just quickly put a link in chat. And then I'm going to say goodbye. Nick's so dry, I bring Vaseline when I come here. Okay, well, that's not a compliment. Anyway, thanks a lot, guys, for joining me. Thanks for the super chats. You guys must have a good sleep tonight. And I'll see you guys probably again Monday for the Jennifer Doulos trial. I'll be continuing coverage of that. If you haven't already followed one of those live streams, please do in the next on Monday. Okay, thanks a lot, guys. Sleep well, sweet dreams. Thanks, mods. Take care. Bye-bye.